Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely pumped you're here today. We are setting the stage to demystify modern continuous integration and delivery. Look, whether your team is pushing a dozen commits a day or deploying these massive complex enterprise architectures, the machinery you use to build, test, and ship your code, that's literally the heartbeat of your engineering culture. So let's just dive right into this and make sense of the tools running the show. And that brings us to the million-dollar question, right? The ultimate infrastructure decision facing software and DevOps teams today. Which CI/CD platform is actually right for your team as we look ahead to 2026? On one side, we've got the undisputed veteran of the industry, Jenkins. And on the other, the incredibly popular native powerhouse that is GitHub Actions. Choosing between these two isn't just a technical preference anymore. It's a strategic business decision. And it directly impacts your velocity, your security, and your cloud budget too. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll meet GitHub Actions. Second, we'll cover core pipeline concepts. Third, scaling with advanced automation. Fourth, we'll pit Jenkins versus GitHub Actions. And fifth, we'll wrap up with security and cost analysis.
All right, Section 1. Meet GitHub Actions.
Think of your software development process like a modern factory. Back in the day, you had to literally build a whole separate building, like a dedicated server, just to house the assembly line that put your product together. But GitHub Actions completely changes the game here. It natively integrates that automated assembly line directly into your existing repository. So you don't need to provision servers or wrestle with complex external integrations just to get your very first build running. It's already there.
So what exactly is this thing? Well, GitHub Actions is a native platform that lets you build automated software development lifecycle workflows right there directly in your repository. It's a fully managed continuous integration and continuous delivery tool. And what does that actually mean for you? It means absolutely zero infrastructure is required to start. No EC2 instances to spin up, no server maintenance windows to worry about, nothing.
The official docs hit the nail on the head here. They point out that you can automate any step of your workflow. Merging pull requests, assigning labels, triaging issues, just to name a few. It's way more than just CI/CD for building and deploying code. Because it lives directly inside GitHub, it can listen to almost any event happening in your repo and just react to it. You can literally automate your entire project management flow right alongside your software deployments. It's the whole shebang. Moving right along to Section 2, Core Pipeline Concepts Explained. Now, GitHub Actions uses a very specific logical hierarchy. It's honestly a lot like a set of Russian nesting dolls. First up, you've got workflows. The workflow is basically your entire factory floor. When an event happens, it triggers a workflow. Inside that workflow, you have jobs. Now, jobs run in parallel by default, handling the really big tasks, like building your app and testing your app at the same time. Inside those jobs, you have steps. And finally, steps execute individual actions. Think of the steps like the robotic arms on the assembly line, performing sequential commands or running prepackaged scripts. Now, your pipeline configuration is handled entirely as code using standard YAML syntax. But there is a strict rule here. You must store these workflows in the .github/workflows directory. By living right next to your code, all your infrastructure configurations are nicely version controlled right alongside the application itself. Okay, so every factory needs a starting gun, right? In GitHub Actions, these are your on events. You can trigger an automated workflow the second a developer pushes code, or maybe when a pull request is opened. You can even run them on a schedule using standard cron syntax, like, say, running a nightly security scan. And you can get incredibly granular with this. You can use branch or tag filters to say something like, hey, only run this deployment workflow if a tag starts with V1, and only on the main branch.
Okay, Section 3, Scaling with Advanced Automation.
Here's the big transition question every growing engineering team hits eventually. How on earth do you handle complex pipelines? I mean, when you have dozens of microservices, multiple operating systems, and all sorts of varying testing environments, those simple YAML files, they can quickly turn into thousands of lines of totally unmanageable code. Enter the matrix strategy. And no, not the movie. It's a configuration that automatically creates multiple job runs based on variable combinations. Imagine you need to test your application on Node.js versions 10, 12, and 14, and you need to test it on both Ubuntu and Windows. Well, instead of writing 6 separate jobs, you just write one single job, define the matrix variables, and GitHub Actions automatically multiplies them out for you. It scales your testing exponentially without making you write redundant code. Pretty cool, right? Now, what happens when you need to share all this logic across your whole company? You basically have two really clever methods for preventing code duplication. First, reusable workflows. These allow you to share entire, complex, multi-job pipelines. One team creates the master golden path deployment workflow, and every other team just calls it. On the flip side, we have composite actions, which are smaller. They bundle a specific sequence of steps to be used within a single job. The key difference? Reusable workflows log every single step visibly, while composite actions are logged as just one single step in the UI.
Which brings us to Section 4, Jenkins versus GitHub Actions.
Let's dive into the real meat here and break down the core architectural differences. Jenkins is fundamentally self-hosted, meaning you manage the servers. GitHub Actions is primarily a managed service hosted by GitHub, though, to be fair, it does allow self-hosted runners if you want. Because of this, Jenkins comes with a very high setup and maintenance complexity, while GitHub Actions has incredibly low complexity. But Jenkins has a massive superpower: over 1,800 plugins supporting basically every legacy and modern system you can imagine. GitHub Actions answers this with the Actions Marketplace, which is growing at lightning speed, but Jenkins definitely still holds the crown for absolute raw flexibility. Then there's the actual code. Jenkins pipelines use a groovy DSL, giving you full programmatic power for complex, imperative logic and highly customized scripting. GitHub Actions, on the other hand, uses declarative YAML. Now, YAML is simpler and generally way easier to maintain, but when YAML isn't quite enough, you might actually find yourself missing the pure programmatic flexibility of Groovy. So let's give you a clear decision framework. You're going to want to stick with Jenkins for sure if your company has strict on-premises or air-gapped data center requirements. You also absolutely need Jenkins if you use multiple source control systems, like say you keep some code in Bitbucket, some in GitLab, and some in SVN. But you should choose GitHub Actions if your code is already sitting on GitHub, you want a seamless, native flow, you want your developers owning their pipelines without needing a PhD in infrastructure, and you want 0 servers to patch. Finally, Section 5, Security and Cost Analysis. Let's talk security models. With Jenkins, you get full, absolute control. You can isolate the network, lock down the agents, audit every little thing. But honestly, that's a massive responsibility. You are the one who has to patch the servers, secure the plugins, and maintain the firewalls. GitHub Actions uses a delegated trust model instead. GitHub actually manages the runner security and patching for you. Plus, it integrates beautifully with OIDC, which means you don't even have to store long-lived cloud credentials in GitHub. They just authenticate dynamically. All right, let's talk dollars and cents. $500 to over $5,000. That is the typical monthly infrastructure and maintenance budget for running a production Jenkins setup. You've got EC2 instance costs, storage, and the dedicated engineering hours just to keep it running. By contrast, GitHub Actions provides 2,000 free minutes per month for private repositories on their free tier, and actually unlimited minutes for public open source repos. You literally only pay for what you use beyond that, with 0 infrastructure maintenance costs. And that brings us to the final thought I really want to leave you with today. Look at your current setup right now. Look at your engineering hours. Is your team ready to stop managing infrastructure and start actually shipping code? Look, both of these tools are incredible, but the industry is undeniably shifting toward managed, frictionless automation. Take a hard look at your workflows this week and ask yourself if you're really using the right tool for the job. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep building, and I will see you next time.